Robert Hoagland was an ordinary 50-year-old man who lived with his wife Laurie, an art teacher at Newtown High School. The couple had raised 3 children who had since grown to adults and moved out, but they remained in the Sandy Hook neighborhood in Newtown, Connecticut. But the family weren't without problems. The couple had previously separated for 2 years, but were able to resolve their issues and reconcile, and were now planning their retirements. However, their 24-year-old son Max was experiencing a severe drug addiction, having previously been to rehab in early 2013 before moving back in with his parents. Robert had quit his job at a restaurant and joined his friend's law firm as a real estate appraiser in an attempt to help his son. He and Laurie were also wanting to take him on a hiking trip to the Appalachian Trail that summer, to take his mind off things and clear his head. In July 2013, Laurie headed to Turkey for 2 weeks with some friends, though she did exchange emails and phone calls with Robert during her time overseas. Just a week into her holiday, and 2 of the family laptops were stolen from their home. Robert immediately blamed their own son, believing that he took them to sell or exchange for drugs. Robert actually apologized to Laurie and blamed himself for allowing it to happen. He then decided to visit an abandoned industrial building in Bridgeport, a location widely known for being used for drug dealing and prostitution. He confronted Max's associates, believing that they were responsible, but it's unclear what was said or what took place. On July the 25th, 2013, $600 was withdrawn from one of the family's bank accounts. 2 days later, Robert and Laurie briefly spoke on the phone, where the plans were confirmed. He was to pick his wife up from the JFK International Airport in New York City when she returns in 2 days' time. The next morning, he drove his wife's Volkswagen Golf to buy some bagels for breakfast at the local bakery. At 6:45 a.m, he stopped at a mobile station on Churchill Road to refuel the car. Cameras did pick him up, seeming incredibly happy as he paid for the fuel and bought a map of the eastern United States. Robert then returned home to have breakfast with Max, who claimed his father then paid some bills and played some online Scrabble for a while. At around 10 or 11 a.m, Robert mowed the lawn as his son left in the Volkswagen, claiming that he would be back in a few hours, not realizing this would be the final time he would ever see his father. On July the 29th, 2013, Laurie arrived at the airport at 4 p.m, but her husband was nowhere to be seen. She tried to call him but received no answer on the landline or his mobile phone. However, she wasn't concerned, believing that he was simply stuck in traffic and was on his way, which had happened a few times in the past. She took a cab to a nearby relative's home where she called up Robert's boss, who advised her that he hadn't shown up to work that day either. The next day she returned home and her husband was still nowhere to be found. She discovered his phone, keys, passport and prescription high blood pressure medication all left behind. He had put his dirty clothes in the laundry and the lawnmower back in its usual place. Robert had a very specific pair of loafers that were the only shoes he would ever wear out, and they were left behind, as well as his Mini Cooper still being parked outside. However, the Volkswagen was missing, so she initially believed that he had just left to run an errand. However, she was then contacted by the police to inform her that her son Max had been arrested the previous night near the abandoned building that Robert had visited a few days prior. He claimed that he took the car to buy some drugs and that his mother had given him permission to do so, which she denied. Max was charged with third-degree trespass and misdemeanor and was held on a $2,500 bond. He pled guilty and was released from custody, but always denied knowing where his father was. Initially, the family believed that he may have gone to hike the Appalachian Trail alone, leading to the National Park Service distributing flyers in the area with photos of Robert to spread the word. It wasn't until August the 6th, 9 days since he was last seen, when Laurie found her husband's wallet and car keys hidden underneath a doll on a chair in their bedroom. Due to this, the theory of Robert willingly leaving on his own accord seemed unlikely, and she now believed that he had been abducted. Investigators searched Robert's work computer and found search history for an address over in Rhode Island, which was checked out, but Robert wasn't there, and nothing of note was found. They then widened their search to his home computer, which led to a dead end as he had downloaded and installed a program just a month earlier which erased all search history and their results. They had quite literally nothing to go on. All wooded areas were searched around Sandy Hook using sniffer dogs. They used sonar to search Lake Zor, but absolutely nothing was found. Robert Hoagland seemed to have vanished into thin air. In September 2013, 2 months since the disappearance, 2 reports of men matching Robert's description were recorded, both in Rhode Island. A man was seen with a backpack walking alongside Rhode Island Route 117, but this turned out to be somebody else. Some workers of the Rhode Island Department of Transportation reported seeing another man with a backpack walking west alongside Rhode Island Route 165, but this man was never found or identified. By December, the search spread over to California, searching Los Angeles, as the family had connections in the Hollywood area, but again, they had no luck. In January 2014, 6 months since he was last seen, a man claimed to have seen Robert enter a thrift store in Brookfield. He was driving a car with a New York license plate, but once the security camera footage was checked, nothing conclusive was found, and it's unclear if this was Robert or yet another false lead. In July 2014, the 1-year anniversary of the disappearance, a man claimed to have seen Robert enter the county jail in Carmel and left after only 2 minutes. The CCTV was checked, but like before, it was inconclusive whether this was him or not. The family believed that the police were wasting valuable time as they were focusing solely on the possibility that Robert had left on his own accord and not foul play. But the police admitted that there was no evidence to really back up either theory. Laurie found that $600 is a very strange amount to withdraw, as it's quite a large number to take out randomly for yourself, but it's also not nearly enough to be able to start a whole new life.
If he wanted out of the marriage, all he would have had to say was that he wanted out of the marriage, but that was not remotely where we were.
The family refused to believe that he would just leave them randomly, especially his own children. Laurie believed that he may have become verbally aggressive with their son's associates at the abandoned building that day, and they may have threatened him or done something in return. But the family believed that even if for some reason he did decide to walk away and start a whole new life somewhere else, he would have most likely been found relatively quickly. They were fully prepared to be told that a body had been found, but they would have to wait for 9 long years. On December the 5th, 2022, the police department of Rock Hill, New York received a call from a distressed man about his roommate. Upon arriving at the property, the man had died, but the roommate couldn't provide any evidence of his friend's identity. He claimed that his name was Richard King, but this didn't bring up any records at all, until they found some letters in the home addressed to a Robert Hoagland. Confused, the roommate searched the name online and was horrified to see that his best friend and roommate for the past 9 years was the missing Robert Hoagland this entire time. After disappearing, Robert headed to New York, where he got a job as a property appraiser for Empire Inspections and Appraisals. By the end of 2013, he saw an ad on Craigslist by a musician named David, looking for a roommate in Rock Hill, New York. Upon meeting the man, he introduced himself as Richard King, but admitted that he didn't have any ID, which naturally did alarm David at first. I asked him, and he said that he had left it behind. He said he left everything behind. He said he was divorced, his children were adults, and he was just looking to start a new life. However, Robert told him about his job, and a mutual friend from the same firm did vouch for him and his work, leading to David trusting him enough to become his new roommate. His lease actually prevented him from subletting, so Robert was never added to the tenancy and no background check was ever done. The landlord wasn't even aware that he was living there until they had both moved out. Furthermore, David only wanted help to pay rent and utilities, but Robert always paid in cash. He only had a few items with him, some clothing, some minor accessories, and a small bed, and he drove a car that was loaned to him by his employer. David also noticed he didn't have a very good mobile phone with him, so he gave him a new one, but put his own name on the phone plan, which unbeknownst to him helped maintain his hidden identity. The two shared similar interests and quickly became best friends. Robert was a great cook, often teaching David, cooking Sunday dinner for him every week, and they would frequently watch sports together. Robert often volunteered at the local soup kitchen near Monticello, even agreeing to be in photos that were published despite being a missing person. But he was always very vague when discussing his past, and David never wanted to pry. He did, however, confess that one of his sons was struggling with a drug addiction. In 2020, David bought his own house, but they had become such good friends that he actually invited Robert to come and move in with him. It wasn't until the middle of 2022 when things began to get worse. Robert had visited a doctor who advised him that he really needed to change his diet. This led to him cooking seafood and vegetables rather than the usual steak and ribs. But David reported that he was slowing down and his health was visibly declining. Not long after, Robert told David that pretty soon he will be receiving mail under a different name, but he didn't provide a reason. Once again, David didn't want to pry, but he assumed that it was for insurance purposes for the healthcare. On December the 4th, 2022, David returned home after performing with his band in New York City, and he noticed that Robert's car was still outside, which was odd as he would usually leave early for work. He checked his security camera and noticed that Robert had returned the previous night holding his back in pain. The next day he noticed that he still hadn't come out of his room to make dinner or go to work, so he asked a friend to stop by the house to check on him. But nobody answered the door and all text messages went ignored. After work, David finally returned home and checked on his friend to find him unconscious and not breathing. He attempted to perform CPR, but he was already dead. This is when he immediately called for assistance, providing the name Richard King before discovering the shocking truth. David claimed that there was nothing ever suspicious or odd about Robert. They were so close he considered him like a brother, but he never questioned that anything was out of the ordinary. He lived a very simple life, and that's why I think he was able to just go under the radar. He didn't bother anybody. He was very kind, very helpful. He was just that kind of person, you know? The family were just as shocked and confused as the rest of the world, and have maintained that they have no idea why Robert decided to run away and start a new life somewhere else, as far as they were all aware, they were completely happy. At the time of recording this, the cause of death has yet to be determined. The coroner's report hasn't been released, but the authorities have currently ruled out foul play. But although Robert Hoagland's movements and whereabouts were solved, in regards to why he randomly decided to abandon his wife, 3 kids and entire life to move to New York and start fresh, we and his entire family continue seeking answers.